A man wakes up alone on a spaceship. He does not know his name. He does not know his mission. And somewhere behind him, two dead crewmates are floating in their seats like a warning nobody wrote down. That is the opening of Project Hail Mary. And as of today, you can finally watch it without leaving your couch, because it just landed on Prime Video. But here is the part almost nobody is talking about. This movie did not take the normal road to get here. It took a 90-day detour, jumped through 3 different platforms, and somehow still made almost $700 million along the way. So today we're not just talking about a movie. We're talking about how a studio quietly rewrote its own release playbook using one film as the test case. Let's get into it. Quick setup for anyone who has been living under a rock or possibly under a dying sun, which is thematically appropriate. Project Hail Mary is based on the 2021 novel by Andy Weir, the same author who wrote The Martian. Ryan Gosling plays Ryland Grace, a middle school science teacher who gets pulled into a desperate mission to stop the sun from losing energy, which would end life on Earth within a couple of decades. He wakes up alone, has to rebuild his memory piece by piece, and eventually teams up with an alien nicknamed Rocky to figure out the problem together. The film was directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the duo behind the Spider-Verse movies and the Lego Movie, and the screenplay was adapted by Drew Goddard, who also wrote The Martian back in 2015. So this is basically Andy Weir's second trip to the big screen, with a lot of the same creative DNA behind the camera. Here is a detail worth sitting with. Critics gave it a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Regular audiences gave it a 95%. That kind of alignment between critics and audiences is rare. Usually one group loves something the other finds mediocre. Not here. The Hollywood Reporter described it as a story about hope wrapped inside a space adventure. Not every review was glowing, though. Variety's critic called parts of the alien subplot overly cute. So, it is not a universally perfect film, but the overall reception is about as close to consensus as movies get in 2026. Let's talk numbers, because these are genuinely wild. Project Hail Mary opened in March with a worldwide weekend haul of $140.9 million. That made it the biggest opening in Amazon MGM Studios history, beating the previous record holder, Creed 3. Then something unusual happened. Most blockbusters drop hard in their second weekend, sometimes losing half their audience. Project Hail Mary only dropped 32%. For context, that kind of staying power puts it in the same conversation as Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2, films known for having serious word-of-mouth legs. People were not just showing up opening weekend out of curiosity. They were telling their friends to go. By its 7th weekend in theaters, it had already out-earned The Martian's entire lifetime total. The final worldwide number landed at $683.5 million, making it the highest-grossing movie Amazon has ever released and one of the biggest films of the year globally. Now here is where it gets interesting for anyone who follows the business side of movies. Normally, when a studio moves a film from theaters to streaming, that gap is about 45 days. That has been the industry norm since around 2020. Project Hail Mary did not follow that norm. It stayed in theaters for a full 90-day window, which used to be standard decades ago, but is almost unheard of today. Then, instead of going straight to Prime Video like most Amazon MGM releases, it took a 3-step path. First, it hit premium video on demand in May, meaning you could rent or buy it digitally. Then in June, it moved to MGM Plus, which is a smaller, separate subscription add-on, not the main Prime Video app most people already use. Only after that did it finally arrive on Prime Video itself, 105 days after its theatrical debut. Why the detour through MGM Plus specifically? Because of how the project was financed from start. According to industry reporting, Project Hail Mary was greenlit under a deal that contracted MGM Plus as its designated first streaming home, separate from the greenlight model used for films that go straight to Prime Video, like the Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans film Red One. In other words, this was not a random scheduling accident. It was baked into the contract before a single frame was shot. The bigger story here is what this says about Amazon's strategy going forward. MGM Plus is a much smaller platform than Prime Video, and giving it exclusive access to one of the year's biggest movies for several weeks look a lot like a deliberate move to boost subscriptions there before eventually opening the floodgates to the massive Prime audience. If that theory holds, expect to see more big titles used the same way. Here are a few things worth knowing that go beyond the basic release news. First, this movie had an unexpected audience in actual outer space. Less than a month after the theatrical release, NASA launched its Artemis II mission, sending a 4-person crew farther from Earth than any human crew since Apollo 13. Before liftoff, that crew reportedly watched Project Hail Mary together, and Ryan Gosling sent them a video message wishing them luck. A movie about an ordinary person thrown into an extraordinary space mission, watched by real astronauts about to do something similar. That is not marketing anyone could have planned. Second, sequel talk. Andy Weir has said publicly that he might write a follow-up novel someday, but he has been clear that nothing concrete is in the works right now. He has ideas floating around, his words, not fully formed enough to commit to yet. So if you're hoping for Ryland Grace Part 2, the honest answer is maybe eventually, but do not hold your breath. Third, if you want the film with special features, you will need to wait a bit longer. A physical release on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD is scheduled for August, with a collector's Steelbook edition following in October, reportedly including behind-the-scenes material on how the character Rocky was built and performed. If Project Hail Mary scratch an itch, Prime Video happens to have a strong lineup right next to it. The Martian is sitting right there, same writer, different director, Ridley Scott instead of Lord and Miller, and honestly a great double feature if you want to compare Andy Weir's 2 big screen adaptations back-to-back. Interstellar is also on the platform, and the comparison writes itself. A scientist leaves Earth to save humanity, except this time it is Matthew McConaughey instead of Ryan Gosling and Christopher Nolan behind the camera instead of the Spider-Verse team. If you have not rewatched it in a while, this is a good excuse. For something a little lighter, Moonfall and The Tomorrow War are also available, less critically loved, but if you're in the mood for big, loud, high-stakes space chaos, they will do the JOB.SO that is the full picture. A movie about saving the sun ended up rewriting how Amazon releases its biggest films, got watched by actual astronauts before a real deep space mission, and became a studio's highest-grossing release of all time almost by accident of strategy as much as quality. If you found this breakdown useful, let me know in the comments whether you think studios should keep stretching out these theatrical windows or whether 45 days should stay the standard. And if you want more breakdowns like this one, you know what to do. See you in the next video.